The desert was endless. The twin suns burned in the sky, turning the land into a sea of fire. Winds carried sharp grains of sand that cut the skin like tiny blades. No creature walked this land without fear. It was a place where life could end. With just one mistake, Ethan, a human traveler, pushed forward step by step. His boots sank into the hot dunes, his lips dry and his skin red from the sun. He had crossed many worlds before, but this desert was unlike any he had seen. It felt alive, as if the land itself wanted him gone. Still, he moved on, because he had heard stories of something strange buried beneath these sands. Then he saw her. At first, Ethan thought it was a mirage, a trick of heat and light. But no, the shape did not disappear. It was the body of a young alien girl lying half buried in the sand. Her skin was pale blue, her hair silver like threads of moonlight. She looked delicate, almost unreal, as if she had been carved from crystal. Ethan rushed forward, falling to his knees beside her. He touched her wrist, searching for a pulse. Nothing. Her chest did not rise. Her lips were still, her eyes closed. The desert had already claimed her. For a moment, Ethan froze. He was only one man, lost in this endless wasteland. Why should he care for a stranger? But something inside him refused to walk away. There was a weight in his chest. A voice that said, "Do not leave her." He placed his hand on her chest and pressed down. 1, 2, 3. His breath burned as he gave her air. The hot winds blew harder around them, as if the desert was angry at his defiance. Sweat poured down his face, but he kept going. "Breathe," he whispered. "Don't you dare die out here." The girl's body remained still. Sand began to pile around them, covering her legs like a shallow grave. Ethan's heart pounded. He pressed again, desperate, fighting against the silence. The desert wanted her gone, but he would not allow it. Minutes passed, or maybe only seconds. Time had no meaning in this burning wasteland. Ethan's arms shook with exhaustion. His voice cracked. Still, he kept trying. Because giving up was not in his nature. He had lost people before. He would not lose her, not today. And then a faint tremor, so small he almost missed it. Her chest moved. Just a little, her lips parted. A weak breath escaped. Her body shivered, as if rejecting death itself. Ethan gasped in relief, but fear quickly returned. Her breathing was shallow, fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. She could slip away again at any moment. He had no water left to give her, no medicine, no tools, just his own will. He lifted her gently into his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder, cold and weightless, her silver hair tangled in the desert wind. She looked almost like a fallen star. Ethan carried her, stumbling forward across the dunes. Every step felt heavier than the last. But he refused to stop. As night began to fall, the desert changed. The burning heat turned into freezing cold. The wind howled like voices in the dark. Shadows moved in the distance, strange shapes, watching, waiting. Ethan's instinct screamed that he was not alone. The desert had more dangers than the sun. Finally, he reached a rocky outcrop, a small shelter from the storm. He laid the alien girl on the ground and wrapped his jacket around her. Her face was pale, her breath shallow, but she was alive barely. Ethan leaned against the stone, exhausted, his eyes scanning the horizon. The desert stretched endless in every direction, but his focus stayed on her. "Why were you here?" he whispered. No answer came, only the sound of wind and shifting sand. He did not even know her name, her people, her story, but he knew one thing. She had been left to die in this merciless land, and he, a human far from home, had chosen to fight death itself for her. As the stars lit the night sky, her lips moved faintly. Ethan leaned close. He thought he heard a word, broken, almost lost in the wind. Don't leave. Her eyes flickered open for just a second, glowing faintly with alien light. Then they closed again, her body sinking back into silence. Ethan's chest tightened. She was alive, but for how long? The desert whispered around them, hungry, waiting. But Ethan's jaw hardened, his grip tightening on the knife at his belt. He would not let her go. Not to the sand, not to the storm, not to death. The desert had taken many lives. But tonight it would not take hers. The desert night was cruel. The heat of the day had vanished, leaving behind a freezing wind. Ethan sat close to the small fire he had managed to build with dried roots, his body shaking from exhaustion beside him. The alien girl lay wrapped in his jacket, her breaths soft and shallow. Her silver hair glowed faintly under the starlight, making her look more like a spirit than a living being. Ethan stared at her face, wondering who she was and why she had been left to die. There were no signs of a crash, no wreckage, no trail of supplies. It was as if she had been abandoned here on purpose. The thought made his chest tighten with anger. Who would leave someone so young and fragile to be swallowed by the sands? The fire crackled, but the desert around him whispered with danger. He could feel it, the sense of being watched. Shadows moved across the dunes, sliding low and fast. At first, he thought it was the wind carrying dust, but then he heard faint growls, predators. The desert was never truly empty. Ethan reached for his knife and pulled the girl closer to the fire. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, glowing faintly. Her lips moved, whispering words he almost could not hear. Danger. They are coming. And then she fell back into silence. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who were they? The beasts in the dark, or something worse? He did not know, but he was not going to wait to find out. With quick hands, he poured the last drops of water onto her lips, praying she would survive the night. Then he stood, scanning the horizon. And that was when he saw them, figures standing at the edge of the dunes. Too tall, too still to be animals. Their eyes reflected the firelight like shards of glass. Ethan's heart pounded. Whoever they were, they had found him. The figures did not approach, not yet. They only watched, unmoving, like statues carved from stone. But Ethan felt their gaze cut into him like knives. He knew one thing for certain. They wanted the girl, and they would not stop until they had her. He returned to the fire, kneeling by her side. Who are they? He whispered, though he did not expect an answer. The girl stirred weakly, her voice no more than a breath. My people. They left me to die. You should not have saved me. Ethan froze. Her people. Why would her own kind abandon her? Before he could ask more, a sudden hiss split the air. An arrow of black glass slammed into the sand just inches from his fire. The figures on the dunes moved, stepping forward slowly, their cloaks flowing in the cold wind. Ethan grabbed the girl and lifted her into his arms, his heart racing. He had to run, but where could he go in this endless desert? He turned toward the rocky outcrop, deeper into the shadows of the land. Sand shifted under his boots as he climbed. The girl, light but fragile in his arms. Behind him, he heard the pursuers give a cry, sharp and inhuman. The hunt had begun. Ethan stumbled into a narrow canyon, hidden from the open sky. The walls rose tall on both sides, giving him a brief cover. He lowered the girl onto a smooth rock, breathing heavily, her eyes opened again, glowing faintly in the darkness. You cannot save me. If they find you with me, they will kill you too. Ethan shook his head. Then they'll have to try, he said firmly, his voice low but steady. She blinked at him, surprised, as if she had never heard such words before. Her kind had abandoned her. But this strange human, this wanderer, was ready to risk death for her. Something unreadable flickered in her gaze before she slipped back into unconsciousness. Ethan leaned against the canyon wall, his knife tight in his grip. He listened to The sound of sand shifting, of footsteps drawing closer. The hunters were coming. And he was outnumbered, but his determination burned hotter than fear. He had already pulled her back from the edge of death once. He would not surrender her now. The canyon grew darker, the firelight fading behind them. Ethan's breath fogged in the cold night as he prepared himself. The figures moved closer. There. Shadows stretching long across the sand. One of them spoke in a strange, harsh tongue. The voice echoing through the canyon walls. Ethan did not understand the words, but he knew the meaning. They were demanding he hand her over. He looked at the unconscious girl, her fragile body trembling under his jacket. Then he looked at the hunters, their eyes glowing with malice. And in that moment, Ethan made his choice. No, he whispered. The single word carrying all the weight of his resolve. The desert might have cursed her. Her people might have abandoned her. But as long as Ethan breathed, she would not be taken. Not by the sands, not by beasts, not by hunters. He was only one man against the night, but he was human, and sometimes that was enough. The canyon was silent except for the hiss of shifting sand. Ethan stood with his back against the rock wall, the alien girl weak in his arms. The hunters had stopped their advance, their glowing eyes fixed on him. For a long moment, neither side moved, the desert night holding its breath. Then the wind roared, carrying the sharp cry of the hunters as they charged. Ethan turned and ran deeper into the canyon, his boots slamming against stone. The girl's body was fragile, every step shaking her. But he had no choice. Arrows clattered against the rocks around him, one slicing the air just past his face. He ducked, swore under his breath, and kept moving. The canyon twisted, leading him into a narrow cave hidden by shadows. Ethan slipped inside, pressing his back against the wall. The hunters' cries echoed outside, searching, circling. For now, he was safe, but not for long. He laid the girl gently on the cold ground, her skin pale, her breaths thin as whispers. "Stay with me," he muttered. Though he knew she could not hear, her eyelids fluttered. A faint glow returning to her silver eyes. For a heartbeat, Ethan froze. She was waking. Her lips moved, weak but clear enough for him to catch. "You should not have done this," she whispered, her voice like a dying flame. "They will kill you for saving me." Ethan leaned close, shaking his head. "Then let them try," he said firmly. Her eyes, glowing faintly, locked onto his. There was disbelief in them, almost confusion, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her. Tears welled faintly before she turned her gaze away. "You do not understand. I was condemned, left to die for a reason." The words cut into Ethan like cold steel. Condemned, left to die by her own people. Why? She was young, fragile, and clearly important, her features too fine, her presence too strange to be ordinary. But before he could ask, her body shook violently, her breath catching. She was slipping again. Back into darkness, Ethan pressed his hands against her chest, panic surging through him. "Not again," he growled. "You're not leaving me this time." He breathed for her, forced her heart to fight. Refusing to let her go, the cave echoed with the sound of his effort, his voice breaking as he begged her to return, and then her chest rose. A faint but steady breath filling her lungs. Her heartbeat, weak but real, pulsed against his hand. Her eyes opened wider, glowing with soft alien light. The breath had returned. Ethan collapsed beside her, gasping, his whole body trembling from the effort. Relief surged through him. But fear still gnawed at his mind. He had pulled her back. Again, but for how long? She was fragile, a flickering flame in a storm, and death was still waiting outside. The girl turned her head slowly, her voice a whisper. "You are human," she said, tasting the word as if it were strange to her. Ethan nodded. "That's Right. Her silver eyes studied him, shining even in the darkness of the cave. You defy death. Why, you owe me nothing. Ethan let out a tired laugh, shaking his head. Because I don't leave people behind, he answered. Simple words. But they carried the weight of his entire life. He had lost comrades before, friends buried by love, war and strangers swallowed by silence. This time he refused to let the desert claim another. The girl blinked, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak more. But then a sound outside froze them both, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing. Through the canyon. The hunters had not left. They were searching, their voices sharp and cruel. Ethan's grip tightened on his knife, his muscles ready to fight. The girl's hand twitched weakly, brushing his arm. You cannot fight them all, she whispered. Her voice carried more than warning, carried sorrow, as if she knew the ending already. Ethan shook his head. His eyes hard. Watch me, he muttered. But before the hunters could close in, the storm came. The wind roared through the canyon, carrying walls of sand so thick the stars vanished. The hunters' cries turned into muffled shouts as the storm swallowed their voices. Ethan grabbed the girl and held her close. Shielding her with his body, the desert shook with fury, tearing at rock and bone alike inside the cave. Sand whipped through the cracks, stinging his skin. The girl's eyes glowed brighter, her voice trembling as she whispered, "The desert. It is angry. You should not have saved me. They will come for you again. All of them." Her words chilled him. Not just hunters, not just beasts, something larger. Something darker was behind her abandonment, but Ethan only held her tighter. His jaw set. "Let them come," he said. His voice hard. "I'll fight them all if I have to." The girl's eyes widened, shimmering with something unspoken. For the first time since he found her, her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. Weak, broken, but real. Then her strength faded. Her eyes closing again, though her breathing stayed steady. She had returned to life, but the danger was far from over. Outside, the storm raged, covering their tracks. But Ethan knew it was only a temporary shield. The hunters would return, stronger, angrier, and the mystery of why she had been left to die would soon catch up with both of them. But for now, in the heart of the storm, Ethan listened to the fragile sound of her breathing, the sound of a life he had stolen back from death itself, and he swore silently, no matter the cost, no matter who came for her, he would not let her die again. The storm had passed, but it left the desert in ruins. Dunes that once stood tall were now scattered hills, reshaped by the winds. The cave where Ethan sheltered was nearly buried, sand pressing against its entrance like a heavy door. He pushed himself out into the pale light of dawn, the girl still weak in his arms. The air was cold now, but heavy with silence. A silence that never lasted long in these lands. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing steady but faint. She was alive, yet still so fragile. Every time he looked at her face, he remembered. The moment her heart had stopped in the sands, he had pulled her back twice. But how many more times could he defy death? Ethan knew one thing: he could not stay here. The hunters would return. The storm had scattered them, but it would not stop them. If anything, it would make them angrier. More determined to finish what they had started, Ethan adjusted the girl's weight in his arms and began moving east, following the shadow of the dunes. Every step was heavy, but his resolve burned stronger than the sun above him. The desert stretched endless. The ground shifted with each step, pulling him down. The heat returned with the rise of the twin suns, burning his skin. He stumbled more than once, his strength draining. But each time he looked at the girl, he kept going. She was his reason to move forward. Hours passed before he noticed footprints. Not his, not hers. Fresh, pressed deep into the sand, circling, following. The hunters were tracking them. Guided by the desert itself, Ethan's chest tightened. There was no escaping them, not in the open. The girl stirred in his arms, her voice weak but urgent. They are close. They will not stop. The desert beasts serve them. Ethan frowned, his eyes scanning the horizon. What beasts? He asked, but the answer came too soon. A howl split the silence, low and sharp. Echoing through the dunes, shapes appeared on the ridges. Lean and twisted creatures with long legs and jaws lined with black teeth. Their eyes glowed faintly, unnatural, as if the desert itself had breathed life into them. The beasts moved in packs, circling, herding him like prey. Behind them, shadows of hunters grew larger on the dunes. The chase had begun. Ethan's muscles screamed, but he forced himself to run. Sand sprayed behind him as his boots dug deep, carrying him down one dune and up another. The girl clung faintly to his chest, her eyes half open, whispering words he could barely hear. They will not let you live. Not with me. Ethan's jaw clenched, his breath ragged. Then we'll make them regret it, he muttered. The beasts howled again, closing the distance. Ethan slid down a steep dune, landing hard at the bottom. The ground cracked beneath. His boots, the sand thinner here, covering something ancient. He stumbled forward, catching sight of stone massive pillars half buried in the desert. Ruins, a place forgotten, swallowed by time. He ducked into the ruins. Weaving through broken walls, the girl still in his arms, the beasts followed, their claws scraping against stone, their cries filling the hollow chambers. Ethan pressed himself against a cracked pillar, his knife tight in his grip. He could not run forever, not with her so weak. If the hunters wanted him, they would have to bleed for it. The girl opened her eyes again, glowing faint in the dark. Her voice was broken but clear. You should not fight them. I am the reason they hunt. I am their condemned. Ethan stared at her, confusion flashing in his eyes. What does that mean? He asked sharply. Her lips trembled, her gaze heavy with sorrow. My people cast me out. I am the daughter of the High Clan, the heir, but I defied their law, so they left me to die. The words hit Ethan harder than the storm. She was no ordinary girl. She was royalty, abandoned by her own blood. And now the hunters chased her to finish what her people had started. Before he could answer, the ruins shook. One of the beasts leaped from the shadows, slamming into Ethan, its teeth snapping inches from his face. He rolled, slashing his knife across its throat. Dark blood sprang across the stones. The creature howled before collapsing, its body twitching in the sand. But more shadows moved, more eyes glowing in the dark. Ethan pulled the girl closer, his breath sharp, his heart pounding. They were trapped, surrounded. Yet when he looked at her, at the tears in her glowing eyes, he felt no fear, only resolve. You're not dying here, he whispered, his voice hard as steel. I don't care who wants you to die, fight them all. The girl's hand trembled as she reached for his arm. You are strange human, she whispered weakly. No one defies the desert. No one defies my people. Ethan gave her a grim smile, his knife raised as the beasts closed in. Then maybe they've never met someone like me, he said. The ruins, filled with growls, with shadows, with the sharp gleam of hunters closing from above, the desert itself seemed to hold its breath, and Ethan stood tall. One man against the storm. The chase through the sands was not over, it had only just begun. The ruins trembled with the growls of the beasts. Ethan stood with his knife ready, his chest rising and falling with ragged breath. The girl lay against the stone, her silver eyes faintly glowing in the shadows. Around them, the desert hunters. And their creatures closed in, their steps echoing through the hollow chambers. For a moment, Ethan thought it was the end. One man, one knife, and a fragile girl against a dozen enemies. But then the ground shifted. A deep rumble shaking the stone beneath his boots. The beasts froze, their glowing eyes darting nervously as dust rained from the ceiling. The hunters shouted in their harsh tongue, their voices sharp with unease. Ethan's grip tightened, but before he could strike, the floor beneath them cracked. A slab of stone gave way, pulling him and the girl into darkness. Sand and dust swallowed the air as they fell, crashing onto a lower chamber hidden beneath the ruins. The hunters' cries grew distant above them, muffled by the heavy rock. For now, they were safe. Ethan coughed, pulling himself up, his arms still wrapped protectively around the girl. When the dust settled, he froze. They were no longer in simple ruins. Strange light glowed from the walls, faint blue lines running like veins across smooth metal, machines, ancient and silent, half buried in sand. The girl stirred weakly, her eyes widening as she saw the glow. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We are not meant to be here." Ethan frowned, his eyes narrowing. "What is this place?" he asked. Her gaze moved across the glowing walls, sorrow and fear mixing in her expression. "This is the memory of the first ones, the machines of the ancients. Forbidden to touch, forbidden to wake." Her words sent a chill through him. These ruins were not just stone, they were something far older, far more dangerous. Ethan laid her gently against the wall, the blue glow reflecting in her pale skin. He stepped forward, brushing sand from the surface of one machine. The lines pulsed faintly under his hand. Reacting to his touch, the hum of power whispered through the chamber. The girl gasped, her voice sharp. "Stop. You cannot awaken them." But it was too late. The walls came alive, light spreading across the chamber like rivers of fire. Symbols glowed in the air, floating and shifting, their meaning lost to time. Ethan stepped back, knife still in hand, his eyes wide. "What is this?" he whispered. The girl's lips trembled as she stared at the awakening machines. "My people fear this place. They say the ancients cursed it, that any who enter will be claimed by the desert itself." Her voice broke as she looked at him. "This is why I was condemned. I spoke against the law of silence. I said the ancient places must be remembered, not forgotten. And for that, they left me to die." Ethan's chest tightened. Now he understood she had defied her people, not by weakness, but by courage. She was not condemned for sin, but for truth. And the truth scared those who held power. He turned back to the machines, their light spreading brighter. The walls shifted, sand falling away to reveal massive doors hidden in the stone. Beyond them, a passage stretched downward, filled with pale blue light. Ethan swallowed hard. "We can't stay here," he muttered. "If the hunters find us, this is the only way forward." The girl shook her head weakly, fear in her eyes. "No. If you follow this path, you defy not only my people, but the will of the desert itself." Ethan knelt beside her, his voice steady. "I already defied death to keep you alive," he said. "What's one more law?" Her gaze lingered on him, torn between fear and something else, something softer. She did not speak, but she let him lift her again, her head resting against his shoulder. Together, they stepped toward the glowing passage, the hum of ancient power rising around them. The deeper they went, the stranger the air felt, cool, heavy, as if the desert's heat could not reach this far. The walls were covered in shifting lights, patterns moving like water. Ethan could feel the machines watching him, testing him. The girl whispered against his chest, her voice faint. "This place remembers. It remembers everything, and it will remember you." Ethan ignored the chill in her words, his steps steady. At last, they reached a chamber, vast and open, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a massive structure, shaped like a heart of crystal, glowing with slow pulses of light. The girl's eyes widened, tears shining in them. The core, she whispered, trembling, the breath of the ancients. It still lives. Ethan stared at the crystal, his jaw tightening. If this core had survived, then maybe it held more than memory. Maybe it held answers. Maybe even hope. But before he could move closer, a roar echoed through the chamber. The hunters had found the lower passage, their voices sharp and angry. The beast's howls followed. Filling the glowing halls with hunger, Ethan shifted the girl gently against the wall. His knife ready in his hand, the core pulsed brighter. As if reacting to the danger, the girl looked at him, her voice breaking. If you fight here, the ancients will wake. Ethan gave her a grim smile, his stance firm. Then let them wake, he said. I'm done running. The chamber shook with the sound of approaching enemies. The core's glow spread across the walls like fire. And in the heart of the forgotten ruins, Ethan stood ready for the battle to come. The chamber shook with each roar of the approaching beasts. Blue light from the core pulsed across the walls like a heartbeat. Ethan stood tall, his knife ready, his body tense. Beside the glowing wall, the alien girl leaned weakly, her silver eyes watching him with fear and awe. The hunters entered, their shadows stretching long against the shining floor. Tall figures wrapped in black cloaks, their glass-bladed spears glowing faintly under the core's light. Their beasts prowled at their feet, teeth bared, eyes burning with hunger. One hunter stepped forward, his voice sharp and cold, human. He hissed in broken words of Ethan's tongue, "Leave her, or die." Ethan tightened his grip on the knife. His chest rose and fell with steady breath. "Not a chance," he muttered, his voice calm but unshakable. The hunters tilted their heads, confused by his defiance, but they did not wait long. With a cry, they charged, the beasts leaping ahead. Ethan moved faster than they expected. He rolled aside, slashing his blade across the throat of the first beast. Blood sprayed across the glowing floor, the creature collapsing in a broken howl. Another leaped, claws flashing, but Ethan ducked low. Driving his knife into its chest, he twisted, ripping the blade free as the beast fell, but there were too many. The hunter's spears cut through the air, their voices echoing with fury. Ethan blocked one strike, barely dodged another. The force of the blows shook his arm, his knife far too small against their weapons. One spear cut across his shoulder, blood staining his sleeve. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. The girl cried out, her voice trembling, "Stop! This place is alive. You will awaken it." Her warning was ignored. The hunters only pressed harder. Their beasts howled, their spears flashing with every strike. Ethan's breath grew heavy, his movements slower, but his eyes burned with fire. He fought not for himself, but for her. Each strike, each cut, each desperate movement was fueled by his promise. He had saved her heart from the sands. He would not let her be taken now. One hunter lunged, his spear aimed for her. Ethan roared, throwing himself into the path, the blade cutting into his side. Pain flared hot, but he did not fall. Instead, he drove his knife upward, slamming it into the hunter's chest. The figure collapsed with a cry, the core's light reflecting in his dying eyes. Ow! The chamber trembled. The core pulsed faster, brighter. Each heartbeat of light stronger than the last. The walls glowed. The air grew heavy. The girl's eyes widened, her voice breaking. It is waking. The ancients are waking. The hunters froze for a heartbeat, unease flickering in their glowing eyes. Then one shouted, pressing forward with rage. Ethan staggered, blood running from his wound, his strength fading. But when he looked at the girl, leaning weakly against the wall, something inside him refused to break. He raised his knife once more. The core answered him. Light burst across the chamber, washing over his body. Symbols burned into the air. Floating around him like fireflies, the hunters cried out, their beasts snarling and snapping at the glowing air. The girl gasped, her hand trembling as she reached for him. You are chosen, she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. The core listens to you. Ethan did not understand, but he felt that this strange power pressing against his skin. His knife glowed with the core's light, each movement sharper, faster. He struck, cutting down another beast. The blade slicing through glass and bone as if it were nothing. The hunters reeled back, fear flickering in their eyes. But the core's awakening was not gentle. The chamber shook, cracks spreading across the walls, sand pouring from above. The girl cried out, clutching her chest as the light reflected in her silver eyes. The core remembers. It remembers me, and it will not let me go. Ethan turned, his chest heaving, his body burning with pain. You're not dying here, he said, his voice firm. The girl's lips trembled, her eyes wet with tears. You do not understand. My people condemned me because of this. Because the core already chose me once, and they feared what I would become. The hunters roared, charging again with fury. Ethan moved to meet them, his knife glowing like fire. Blood splashed across. The stone's cries of pain echoing in the chamber. Each strike drained him. But the core's power drove him on. Trial by fire, trial by blood, and Ethan endured it all. At last, the final beast fell, its body crumbling into silence. The hunters pulled back, their cloaks torn, their eyes burning with hate. But they did not charge again. Instead, they turned and vanished into the shadows, their voices promising vengeance. The chamber grew quiet again, except for the sound of Ethan's heavy breath. He staggered, nearly falling, but the girl caught his arm weakly. Her silver eyes glowed brighter now, tears running down her cheeks. You should not have done this. You should have let me die. Ethan looked at her, blood staining his side, his face pale but unbroken. Not happening, he said, his voice low but steady. I'll fight the whole desert if I have to. The core pulsed brighter, filling the chamber with light. The girl's lips trembled as she whispered, then the desert itself will answer you. The walls groaned, the ground shook. The trial of fire and blood was over. But something far greater had just begun. The chamber roared like a living storm. The core pulsed brighter, its light spilling across every crack in the stone. Ethan stood swaying, blood running from the wound in his side, his knife glowing faintly in his hand. Beside him, the alien girl clutched his arm, her silver eyes wide with fear and wonder. The ground shook, sand falling in heavy streams from the ceiling. The core's heart, like crystal, throbbed with light. Beating faster, louder, as if alive, it answered to him. Ethan could feel it, the strange power pressing into his bones, but it answered to her too, the girl trembling under its glow, as if its call pulled at her very soul. Above, the hunters returned, their voices echoing through the broken ruins. They had not fled, they had only gathered more, dozens now, their cloaks black against the shining blue light. Their beasts snarling at the edges of the chamber. Their leader stepped forward, his voice sharp as glass. She was condemned to the sands, he hissed. She belongs to death, the girl's body shook, her voice weak but firm. No, she whispered, her silver eyes glowing brighter. I belong to life. Ethan steadied her, his grip tightening on his knife. She's not dying here, he said coldly, not while I breathe. The hunters raised their spears. The beasts howled. The core blazed with light, filling the chamber with its fury. And then the battle began. They came like a flood, their spears flashing, their beasts lunging. Ethan met them head-on, every strike of his knife burning with the core's power. Blood splattered across the glowing floor, cries echoing in the chamber. He fought like a man possessed, each cut fueled not by rage, but by the promise he had made to keep her alive. Pain ripped through his body with every wound, but he refused to fall. The girl pressed her hands against the core, her voice breaking into whispers of an ancient tongue. Symbols burned in the air around her, glowing brighter with each word. The core answered her call, its light flaring until the whole chamber shook. The hunters staggered, shielding their eyes, their beasts howling in fear. The desert itself seemed to cry out. Its voice carried in the shaking walls. Ethan cut down another beast, his chest heaving, his vision blurring, but when he turned, he froze. The girl was standing now, weak but unyielding, her body glowing with the core's light. Her heart had once stopped beneath the sands, but now it beat strong, pulsing with every flare of the ancient crystal. Her voice rose, no longer weak, but commanding. "You will not take me," she cried, her words ringing across the chamber. "You will not take him." The hunters hesitated, fear flickering in their glowing eyes. They had cast her out to die. But now she stood alive, chosen again. By the core, their leader roared in fury. Lunging with his spear, Ethan threw himself between them. Knife clashing against glass, sparks flying in the blue light. The force of the blow drove him to his knees, blood dripping from his arm. But before the spear could pierce him, the girl raised her hand. The core answered, light exploded outward, a shockwave slamming into the hunters, hurling them back against the walls. The beasts shrieked and scattered, vanishing into the shadows. The leader's spear shattered, shards raining across the floor. Silence followed, broken only by the core's steady pulse. Ethan fell to one knee, gasping. The girl rushed to him, her hands trembling as she pressed against his wounds. Her silver eyes glowed brighter, tears falling down her cheeks. "You nearly died for me again," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan gave her a tired smile, his breath heavy. "Worth it," he muttered. Every time the core's light softened, glowing like a calm heartbeat. It wrapped around them both, warm, protective, alive. The hunters were gone, their shadows scattered by the ancient power, the deserts. Fury had been answered not by death, but by defiance. The girl leaned close, her forehead resting against his. "You saved me." "Not once, but again and again," she whispered. "My heart had stopped beneath the sands. But you refused to let it die." Ethan closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. But his voice stayed steady. "And I never will," he said. The core pulsed once more, brighter than ever. As if sealing their bond, its light spread upward, through the cracks of the ruins, into the endless desert sky. Above, the twin suns rose higher, their light blending with the glow below. The desert that had once been her grave was now her rebirth. Her heart beat strong again, not just for her people, but for the future that had begun with one human's will. Ethan leaned against the crystal, his hands still gripping hers. The desert was still dangerous. Her people would still come, but together. They had defied death itself, and in that defiance, something greater had awakened. The girl's silver eyes shone as she whispered, "The desert took my last breath, but you gave it back to me." Her words hung in the air, soft but eternal. And for the first time since he found her in the sands, her lips curved into a real smile. The desert was not the end. It was only the beginning.